So my friends made a really stinking cool game. I'm going to talk about it. So Reign in Hell is a very simple, straightforward, and very fun looking miniature game that doesn't have their own models. It's miniature agnostic, and it's put together by two people that you may very well know from the wargaming community. That's Adam from Tabletop Minions and Vince Ventrella of the channel of his same name, but you might know him from the weekly show Warhammer Weekly. They were kind enough to send me an advanced copy of this because they just asked if I could talk about it, and I have never been so honored to do so. I've never known anybody who made a game personally, and I'm more than excited to jump into this. So in this video, what I'm going to do is go over kind of the premise of the game, some basics about how it works, sort of the cool features that it has, and I'm going to hopefully timestamp those all so you can jump to whatever section grips you. But go ahead and support these guys. I love these kinds of indie games. They are, again, model agnostic. You can use anything you already have. Anytime you can get value from models you've already bought, I think is a win. And I think that you're going to like this. So rather than just staring at my face the entire time, let's go into some copyright-free Art of Hell, and we're going to be talking about Reign in Hell. So what is the story behind Reign in Hell? Well, essentially, what we're looking at here is an idea of hell as being a very ordered place. It's a completely opposite realm that runs parallel to our own, where demons of all different kinds of shapes and sizes are trying to attain human souls. They want them, they want to gobble them up. It's their source of energy, their source of life. For the longest time, Hell was ruled over by a directorate, a great many demons that were kind of just organized well into helping and basically organizing how we're going to procure human souls. One of the tools at their disposal was a gateway that allowed basically demons to go into the mortal world and mortals to come back with them. There were a few rules and caveats, however, to keep Hell organized. You could not bring back somebody unwillingly. So now, demons were disguising themselves as fairies and nymphs and gnomes and all these little cute creatures to go out and try to lure people willingly back into Hell. It was one of these lesser demons going out and trying to tempt a toddler to come with him that they actually were caught and interrogated. And this is when mankind learns about the existence of Hell as a physical, real place rather than something from, a religious text or a philosophical view. A large army was put together and mankind marched upon Hell. Now, the details of that specific battle are very vague. However, one thing I will say is at the end of it, the directorate that ran and organized Hell had collapsed, the portal was shut down, and things were in absolute chaos. I'm assuming everybody who went into Hell to shut it down died, all the humans and that kind of stuff, but now we have a situation where there's no organization, there's no power structure in place to make sure there's a constant influx of souls coming in. So, when you and I play Reign in Hell, you take the role of a demon of great power and renown and a deep sense of conviction about how Hell should be run. And there are a lot of ways that it could be run, and so you're kind of building a warband and a bunch of followers to assert your dominance of, no, I'm the one who should be in charge, this is how Hell should be run. And so what I'm going to do now is basically move into talking about the different ideological views about how Hell should be run. These are the different sub-factions, I guess you could say, or faction traits that you can use within the game. First off are the Lords of Hell. Simply put, they are fighting to restore Hell's glory and old ways. These, they saw the collapse of the directorate of all of Hell, and now they're like, okay, we got to get this system back in place. Let's get this running again. So they favor the old ways, certainly a response to catastrophe. Next up are the Earthbound, and they're looking to escape Hell permanently for Earth. They just literally want it to be absolutely unleashed. Have like a true Armageddon of demons just pouring across the mortal plane. Next up are the Demented. They choose to embrace the madness of Hell, which is a great chaotic idea. Almost like a chaotic neutral for a demon, if you could, where it's just everyone for themselves, no order, no structure, take what you want by force. Then there are the Brokers, who trade and deal in the currency of souls. These are often the kind of demons that you get from folklore where you make a deal with the devil, so to speak, for your soul. Well, they want to take that same idea of commerce and build it up into a free open market, if you will, of demonhood within hell. Everything's very transactional. Next are the judges, who are using and abusing the remaining rules for power. These are people who look for loopholes and that kind of stuff about how can I manipulate systems in place to be able to get the most power and souls to me. And lastly, there are the empty, and they are wanting to see hell destroyed and unmade. This is true anarchy. They're just like, this whole system is corrupt, is falling apart. Without the directorate, it needs to end. Within the book for this game, there is a quote and a kind of idea of their iconography and beliefs for each of these philosophies about how hell should be run, and you and your warband get to represent that. So when you and I play a game of Reign in Hell, this is exactly what's happening. You build a warband, your leader is based around a certain philosophy. They have a dedicated, sycophant, a follower named the Devout, who's right there with them trying to make that dream come true. And then everything else is you hiring demons or asserting your power or authority over them, building a warband, and taking on others for the purposes of basically marking your claim as the one who decides what hell should be like. And so that is the actual pitch for the story of the game. It's very simple because there's a lot of room for you to create whatever, motivations or kinds of demons you want to have. They can look very human-like. They could look very monstrous. Do whatever you would like. But what I'm going to do now is transition into talking about the actual rules of the game to give you a sense of how this story, this really cool premise, which is just metal AF, is brought to the tabletop. Alright, so here we are at the downward cam. I hope you enjoyed that little lore bit. I'm going to kind of skip ahead here, and I'm just going to talk about a few aspects of the game that if you're looking for a miniatures game that you would want to know. The first one is what you actually need to play. So warbands in this game are made from between 7, roughly, and 10 models. 10 being the actual max that you can take on the table, so there's not a whole lot of spamming out there. The playboard is 22 by 30 inches, so anything that you have that is the minimum size, like the Kill Team board size or the Warcry board, those are the exact same measurements. And of course, if you have a 4x4 or anything like that, you can always just mark off the different edges. You're going to need some terrain, a bunch of D6s, because that's what they use mostly for attacking and stuff. You'll also need a D12 for every model in your warband, or cabal they call them. It's like your group of demons that you're leading. And that plays into initiative, which is an extremely interesting design choice that I want to talk about later on. But for every one of your units, you need to have a D12. Honestly, for most folks, that's not a problem. Me, I don't play a lot of role-playing games, and so I don't have that many, but I'm going to go grab some right after this. They do the standard glossary of terms. I'm just going to kind of skip through the stuff that, quite frankly, most of us who have played miniature games would already know. I definitely encourage you to read it just to make sure, but this is all very, very basic stuff. Now, initiative, as I mentioned before, is a part of the game that I find incredibly interesting. You and your opponent will both take a number of D12s equal to the number of models you have left on the board, and you're going to roll those. And then you're going to put them in order, and the order in descending fashion is the order that your units activate. So, the example here, if you roll an 11, a 10, 8, 8, 4, player 2 rolls a 12, a 9, a 7, 4, 3, 2, basically you're going to go back and forth, going downward. If you ever have the same number, whoever went last gives up the turn. Your opponent goes next. That way you're always alternating on like tiebreaker kind of things. But what that means is you could have a situation where player 1 will activate a model, and then player 2 has the next number in sequence going down from 12. They'll activate a model, then back to 1, and you can just kind of hopscotch that way. There are, not that I've seen a ton of ways to manipulate the initiative dice, but what it does is it breaks up the kind of chain of command, not chain of command, the order of operations. So it's not I go, you go specifically, but it does kind of randomize how many activations you get in a row. And this is important because let's say you roll hot and you're like 12s and 11s, you know, across the board. Well, what that means is, yeah, you're going to get to activate just about everything you want, but your opponent then has the entire rest of the round to be able to actually claim objectives and delete your dudes and that kind of stuff. So again, if you've played bolt action where you randomly draw, you know, to see whose activation is going to go, it's like a different way of doing that, which I think is wonderful. Anytime you can play with activations in an I go, you go setting, I think is so stinking cool. It took me a second. Once I read that, I just really, really fell in love with it. If you ever lose half of your models, you can retreat. This is really only matters for campaign play. This way you're not giving up, you know, basically kill points to your opponent and suffering damage for your existing demons, that kind of thing. We'll talk about the campaign play, but I just wanted to put that out there that there is a kind of a break mechanic so that you can concede within the context of the rules so your opponent doesn't just stomp you. When it comes to building a cabal, which is their word for warband or something like that, this is a fantastic way to break down building an army. It goes step by step. There's absolutely no questions here. The book was put together really well in such a way that it's easy to reference everything. That's all. It just was really nice for me. Probably the easiest rule set that I've had a chance to read lately. Let's say we're going to do a campaign play, right? We're going to build our cabal for a campaign. It tells you got 100 souls, souls being the resource that you spend to buy demons and upgrades and all this kinds of stuff. Lesser demons only, and maximum of 10. That's all there is to it. If you're playing in a campaign, demons will suffer injuries or level up or gain all kinds of access to new cool things. There's a lot of cool stuff going on for campaign play. It's very, very simple. Simple does not mean bad in any way. So you make your leader. Let me see here. So you determine the game type, select your philosophy. Now, when I mentioned before in the lore section, the philosophy is what your warband wants hell to be like. Okay, and there's actually a great little bit here that I pulled inspiration from. So for example, we'll go with the Lords of Hell. Everything in the universe heeds hierarchies, from the lowliest lobsters to the gods themselves. Everything has an order. The powerful, the capable, and the strong are at the top. The weak, foolish, and incapable are at the bottom. It is the natural order of things. So you have a group that their vision is to reestablish order in hell. You have some that want to break out of hell and pour into the earth. You have some that just want true madness. Some that use the brokers, like exchange souls as currency. I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff. So pick a philosophy. It gives you an army rule. They're kind of like sub-factions, honestly. It gives you an army rule and a special rule for your leader. And then the next thing is to create that leader who will have those special rules. We'll get to character creation here in a second, but to put it really simply, the way the warband works is you get a hero. In this case, I'm going to use a lineage highborn from Parabellum as my example here. That's going to be my leader. Let's say I'm going with judges. These guys have sort of an austere, old school judge kind of look with the crazy wigs and things. You then, I should clarify, you don't pay anything for your leader. Always costs 0 points. The same can be said for your devout. Basically, you get a hero and a bruiser, so to speak, at no cost at all. The leader is the one who's trying to assert their will. The devout represents their most dedicated follower who wants to see those ideals brought to life. From there, you're going to be buying lesser demons. They'll all be able to take part with the philosophy, if there's any special rules that apply to them. But the two units, leader, devout, are the core of your cabal or warband. After you have your devout... actually, I should say one special note on the devout. Whatever philosophy you take, it dictates what unit entry they are. So like your leader can be a few different things. He can be very tanky or more of a schemer, very fast and that kind of thing. Whereas your devout is bound to what type of philosophy you take. So we're going to move on here. They give you a good description. This is the philosophy section. They have a cool quote. They have, obviously, their devouts are kind of picked for you. And then you have a cool common iconography. So you can do whatever you want modeling-wise, but they do give you a few little nudges into some cool directions to make these flavorful, which is a win. They also have a blurb about their beliefs. You have the leader bonus, so it's just happens to your leader, and then special abilities, which is faction-wide. The section then comes to the list of demons. Now, one thing I want to say about this section here that makes it very cool is they are very vague, or not vague, because vague makes it sound like a negative, but very open in terms of articulating what kind of demons you have. Again, this is a miniature agnostic game. So, for example, with your leader, you can choose one of 3 archetypes: the warrior, the schemer, and the zealot. You can pick whatever you want. No models, they kind of give you some general idea for base sizes. A lot of them are set to like GW or Privateer Press base sizes, but you can do whatever you want. The real idea is like your hero and your devout should generally be bigger and stronger, and the lesser demon should be fairly tiny. That's basically the crux of it. Everything beyond that is just a suggestion. You have the entries for the devout. Again, they cost nothing, no souls whatsoever. Gives you their movement stat, how much life they have, and their combat score. We'll talk about movement and combat here in a second. So we're in Warband creation still. You over here to the minion section. You have lesser demons, greater demons, and superior ones. Here's basically how this works. You're going to buy, if we're doing a campaign thing, you can only buy lesser demons. And again, they give you very vague, generic type of terms. So Slaughter Fiend, a Mephit, Tentacle Beast, Armored Demon, Spine Demon, Corpulent Demon. So they're just kind of, random generalities that you can use to use whatever model you want. Gives you their cost, the movement, life, and combat score. Now, these can upgrade and evolve into greater demons and superior demons. So like during campaign play, you can have these guys really ramp up and get really freaking cool. So we'll move past that. We'll talk about that in the campaign section. And on this page, this is page 22, it starts with the detailed look at, this would be the equivalent of an AOS, a war scroll entry, where you have, let's go here, choose a leader type. Every leader has a set of stats that we covered before, as well as a special ability. So let's pick Zealot. I like the Zealot one. Movement of 7 inches, 13 life, and a combat score of 6. Again, we'll get to why those things are important in a second. Ability. Whenever a Zealot makes a combat attack roll, they increase their combat score by 2. If they are attacking an enemy leader, they instead increase their combat score by 3. I'm going to come back to this because I'm going to use this as an example when we get to movement and attacking. From there, you're going to pick a Leader's Essence, which is essentially a command ability. It's just a unique thing about them. A command trait, I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say from Age of Sigmar. Where it's just a unique thing. It's limited to the leader for the most part. And it's just a way to make them a little bit unique. They can also pick one relic, which is the same thing. It's you only have one leader. He gets to choose a single relic, and that's about it. You then go over to your Devout Demon. One thing I want to point out is the sidebars are extremely helpful in this book. So yeah, and this gives you the same thing. It's a unit entry with special rules and stats for all of the variations of the Devout Demons based on which philosophy you have. And then finally, the exact same thing when it comes to the lesser, greater, and superior demons. They all have their own little things, their own special abilities. I haven't tried building one yet. I've actually gotten more crazy with buying models for them rather than actually looking at the stats. But that's going to be it for for Warband creation. So in most games, you have a point total of 100. You're just going to assemble your models, put them into Warband. Your leader, and your Devout are free, no matter which kind you get or how you outfit them. And then everything else is for, all the points left are for your demons. And so now we're going to move into talking about movement and combat. When you play Reign in Hell, every time you activate a model or a part of your cabal, You get to move and attack in any order that you want. However, you cannot do them twice. You can't move, even if you did an attack. You get a movement and you get an attack. It gets more complicated from there, but the base idea is very, very simple. When it comes to movement, things are as crystal clear as can be. Your movement score in inches. So our zealot guy, I think, moved 6 or 7. Boom, 7-inch movement. If you fly, you just ignore terrain effects that you step on and vertical distance when it comes to moving. Climbing, you just go half speed, and you have to be able to stand firmly on whatever surface you just climbed. So no halfways up and that kind of thing. You have to be able to make it all the way up there. And that does impact your terrain decisions just a bit. Just make sure that units can actually move places. If they want to get on top of a building, maybe have a ladder there and say, the ladder lets you get up there plus 2 inches or whatever. I don't know. But having some way for everyone to get up on top of terrain and that kind of stuff could be really cool. When it comes to combat, every time you activate a model, you get to choose a combat style. Meaning, how are they fighting this turn? It's not just about punching somebody, but how they do it. So you can choose 3 options. There is the running skirmish, which combines your movement and combat, meaning you can move partial distance, do your combat, and then move again, which is fantastic for hit and run type units, especially ones that can fly and maybe get over a wall out of the way. You could do a charge, which is a movement. You have to end within 1 inch of an enemy, and you can't move again for any other reason. But if you do the charge, your combat score increases by 1 for your attacks made until the end of that action, basically. Next up is focused combat. You may not move, but your combat score increases by 1 for attack and defense rolls. We'll get to how that works in a second. Basically, it just makes you better at standing and fighting, which if you are actively engaged with an enemy, you're already doing. Combat range. To fight another demon, you must be within half an inch of that demon horizontally or 2 inches vertically, measuring base to base. Base to base is a great decision there. Now, the way combat works in this game is very, very straightforward. You have a combat score, which we mentioned for all of our units here. I'm just going to go ahead and pick one at random here. So let's say a Slaughter Fiend is going to fight against a Tentacle Beast, okay? Slaughter Fiend has a combat score of 6. Tentacle Beast has a combat score of 4. What you're going to do is roll a number. Let's say I'm attacking, okay? I've got the Slaughter Fiend as my dude. I want to attack this Tentacle Beast. I'm going to roll a number of dice equal to my combat score, 6. And then you compare them to get what results you need. So if it's greater than, you need a 2 or more. If it's equal to, 3 or more. If it's less than, 4 or more. So what that means is I roll 6 dice because my combat score is 6. 6 is greater than his 4. So I'm going to be hitting on 2s. Again, this is an incredibly brutal game. I cannot emphasize that enough. Things are going to die and die aggressively fast. And let's say of the 6 attacks, and I'd say I have a bad roll, and only 3 get through. Rolled a bunch of 1s, okay? Now, the Tentacle Beast gets to do his defense rolls. He's going to roll a number of dice equal to his combat score. Any 6s, negate 1 wound. And then after that, all the wounds that went through, like let's say he negated 2, which would be a stellar roll, only 1 wound would go through for my example. So in that way, you're using 1 number, the combat score, for both offense and defense. Now, the thing that I wanted to point out earlier, the Zealot entry, whenever the Zealot makes a combat attack roll, they increase their combat score by 2. So you got to think about this. Even though the combat score is the same number, when the Zealot is making an attack, it goes up by 2. When he's defending, it will stay the same. So you have to be careful about when your attack score or combat score is being modified. Pay very good attention to that. But for the most part, it's very straightforward. So that's a great example of like, he's hitting harder than he can take a hit, which is just phenomenal for a Zealot. That's exactly the idea. Coming back here to the rules about combat and stuff. Again, for each successful attack that was not defended, the target suffers 1 damage. And you can get a sense of how much damage they can take just by taking a quick little look at their life. It goes pretty much from, 7 all the way up to 15. The 15 one being the corpulent demon, so he's just kind of tough, but combat score is not stellar, so he's just kind of a wound tank, for example, of course. When a demon is slain, a few cool things happen. That's when we bring in the next concept of soul dice. So first off, let's say I kill, the tentacle demon that I was fighting. My opponent is going to take 1 of their initiative dice, those D12s that we went back and forth. Well, now he has fewer models on the table than he has initiative dice, and so he's going to pull 1 away. The trick is, you can pull away whatever initiative dice you want of the ones remaining. You can basically game the system to let your opponent either go or not go in such a way as to kind of work to your advantage. Basically, it gives you a little control over the order of operations when it comes to the I go, you go initiative system. In addition to that, because I killed an enemy, I will get a soul dice. So let's say I rolled a 6. This then goes on my side, and I kind of keep track of that. It kind of almost works like a Destiny dice from AOS. And in the future, when I'm doing attacks and stuff like that, I can roll the attacks and then pull 1 of those dice out, put my 6 in there, and then use that as if I had rolled it. Conversely, you could also spend this to increase your movement value for 1 round for your demon. So let's say I activate my Devout next, next round or whatever like that. I spend the 6, activate a demon, increase their movement ability by the face value of the soul dice for that action. So this guy can be supercharged with speed. That is the idea behind that. You have a third option, which is just to save it. At the end of the game, every soul dice that you have will give you more souls to be able to buy new demons and that kind of stuff. So you have a lot of options for killing enemies. And the reason that that's important, whether or not you're playing a campaign game, because obviously, you wouldn't be buying new troops and that kind of stuff if you're not playing a campaign game. The reason it's important is you always have incentive to take enemies out, right? There's so many games where, once a unit has gone, they are no longer a threat. There's no reason to attack them. You should probably attack somewhere else and smash, another unit that hasn't gone yet before they can hit you. In Reign in Hell, you get so many possible bonuses from taking out enemies that you're always incentivized just delete them. And so that's what makes it so brutal, is like, if I delete that unit, I get a soul die. Well, hopefully gives me just enough speed for this other guy in the back to rush forward and smash their leader. Or in a real tight pinch, I can turn that die into an auto hit or something like that. There's always a reason to go after your opponent and be incredibly aggressive. Now we're moving on to the terrain section. I like this because it's very simple and straightforward for folks who want to be able to control the complexity of their game. Essentially, you have a few different kinds. You have ruins, shrines, swamps, forest, pools, and crags, okay? And you can they give you descriptions loosely. Basically, you and your opponent just decide what they are before the game starts. Now, for each one of these, they have a standard rule, and then some optional rules if you wanted to add a little bit of flavor, okay? Essentially, I'll give you one example that I really like is shrines, okay? They kind of describe what the idea behind a shrine is. Rules, this is the standard rule. When a demon moves within 1 inch of a shrine, instead of attacking, they may supplicate at the shrine for power. If they do so, roll a d6 on a 4-up. They may choose to either increase their combat ability by 1 for the remainder of the game, or heal 1d3 points of damage. Any single demon may only supplicate to the shrine once per game. So that's the core rule. I like that. You can either heal or get a little more killy. Awesome. But then from there, at the discretion of the players, shrines may also have one of the following rules. So these work on top of that initial one. You have Empowered, which is that basically the bonus works on a 3-up instead of a 4-up. But on the result of a natural 1, the demon suffers 1d6 points of damage as they are found unworthy. I love it. Then they also have Cursed. The shrine has been polluted, and whenever any prayer for power is successful, as per the rules above, on a dice roll of 5 up, your Cabal loses a soul dice if you currently have one. If you don't worry about it. But it's just kind of a way to kind of get you a little bite back. So these are just optional ways to kind of tinker with the core idea of a shrine. You can do whatever you want. You can just play with the standard rules, or you can use the optional ones to kind of bring out a bit more flavor. That one's totally up to you, but I like the diversity of ideas that they have. They also have a little terrain generator here, which is wonderful. And basically, it just kind of gives you an idea of like, hey, you want a light, medium, or heavy terrain table, and then tells you how many times. If you really have no idea what you want to make, you can just roll on this chart and boom, you'll create it. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is campaign play. Honestly, for me, this is the shining part of this book because it's so interesting. Essentially, you'll play your normal game just like you would, 100 souls, that kind of stuff like we went for before. But then you just do these steps in between games to see how your warband evolves. And they do have a worksheet on their website where it helps you kind of track some of this. I think that would be really, really helpful. I was thinking, like, I was looking for it in the book, but honestly, it wouldn't help you in here because you would write on it and then it would get ruined really quickly. Anyway, so after a campaign game is done, you have to see any demon who died is going to roll on this 2d6 chart. So it just goes from 2 to 12. And whatever your score is, you apply that effect to them. At this point, you go over to the second step. So this is anybody who died. Anybody who died has to roll on this thing. You have effects that make them better at stuff, make them worse. It's all a toss-up. Step 2 is to cull the weak. If you want to, let's say you have a guy who's been so thoroughly crippled that he's just not useful in the game anymore. You can get rid of him and you are refunded 50% rounding up of the original cost of the demons in souls. It just gives you a chance to just kind of restart, refresh a little bit. You can kind of buy a new dude who's not all haggard and beaten to hell. And then you have the rewards table for anybody who survived the battle and that kind of stuff. You get the chance to roll on the rewards table. And for doing so, you have all kinds of stuff you can... these are just basically like battle honors. You can upgrade stuff because your guy was a BA and he just tanked in battle. You can also find some relics. These are relics that any of your demons can have, whereas the list before was just for leaders. So that's cool. This is the part that I love, and I didn't know that I wanted it in a game until it was right in front of me and I was reading it. So these are called titles. Think of these as like achievement unlocked things for this game. So it gives you a requirement, and if any one of your demons achieves it, they get a title which gives them a special rule. So I'll give you an example. Slay 2 different enemy leaders over any number of games. If at any point in your playthrough, your campaign game, one of your demons takes out your opponent's leader twice, in 2 different games obviously, increase the combat ability by 1 when fighting enemy leaders. He just gets better at killing heroes. That one is the Regent Slayer. You also have everything from Backstabber, Unstable Steps, which is if you die on terrain, which is just saddest. The terrain must deal the final damage to the demon. The demon may roll twice when making a check for any terrain. Select either result. So it just gives them a little bit more, I don't know, sure step, if you will. But there's a whole bunch of stuff here that are just fantastic. Little achievements that you can keep track of or not, that just add a little bit of, I don't know, character to your guy. Things that they've accomplished or, wounds that they've suffered, that kind of thing. Now, next step is advancement. You get 1 experience point for just showing up. You get 1 experience if your demon lives. So for every demon that lives, they get an additional experience point. And if you were victorious in this scenario, you get 1 additional one as well. So your leader, let's say you win the game and he doesn't die, will get 3 points. This is in addition to anything that you get from specific missions or whatever. The real crux of it here is that you're keeping track of your experience points, and as you advance, and then you don't have to like, use them to buy a level or anything like that. You just keep track of how much they have, compare it to this list, and they get a special rule, a little bonus, get better at movement or combat or whatever. That's mainly the big ones. I don't know, but I like that because you have this plus any injuries they've suffered before. So you could have, let's see, you could have a guy who's weakened, but then in the next game he gets just enough experience to advance, and all of a sudden he can restore that wound and kind of negate it a little bit. So there's cool ways to do that kind of stuff. There's also this idea of recruitments and expeditions, which are just spending resources to go out and get artifacts or something like that. It's a way, if someone's kind of running away victorious with souls, it gives them a way to spend them, which is real nice. And then lastly are these scenarios. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on these because they're really for you and your opponent to decide what you want to do. As one thing I will point out though is that this is really nice because it has a little rubric for how many players there are. And there is one mission where it's just one player. You could play it solo. You're basically playing the AI. But everything else is at minimum a 2-player option, with many missions going all the way up to 4 players. So there's a lot of game in here, and I think that it is pretty cool. They're basically just walking you through where to put objectives, and they have the rules for how to interact with those game example. So then at the bottom, or at the back I should say, you have all your reference charts. This is honestly pretty much everything you need. It's all the rules that we talked about summarized so that during a typical game, you really just throw a bookmark in this page and this will answer most of your rules questions. So when you put it all together, Reign in Hell represents a very cool way that wargames, I think, frankly, should be more, which is just a small amount of miniatures. You can use whatever you want. It's not, again, there's no model company behind this. This is the game, and you can use whatever you have at your disposal to do with it. I was going to be using my Dungeon Master set to create a Warcry board. I'm actually going to build something for this instead. I mean, it's the same dimensions it can be used. I'm just not going to build a Catacomb style because I'm so excited to try this out. Thank you so much to Vince and Adam specifically for sending me this. I'm actually going to end this here by showing you a picture of all the people that were involved in making this, many of whom you might know from the community in AOS. But what I want to say most of all is just, you should really go support these guys because these are the kinds of games that just add so much value to our hobby. If you have somebody who is not into miniature wargaming, this is the kind of game that is not intimidating. It's not a massive, however, I use my Warhammer 40k core book literally to boost up my computer because it's that thick, it can do so. So I have that, this is very simple, very straightforward. They can go and they can pick just a few Reaper miniatures that they like the look of, and you can create a really fun game for a very low price that doesn't scare people off. I have in the description down below a link to where you can get this. Again, like I said, I believe it's going to be $15 US to get a printed copy and a PDF. Don't quote me on that. This is a little bit before the actual stuff comes out, which makes it probably the cheapest miniature game out there. But it is incredibly fun, and I think that you guys should check it out. So thank you so much, and I'll catch you later. Happy wargaming.